Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, finally, and it is South Africa at last. Keep in mind, this is a preview version, so not everything is final. Some models need some extra touching here and there, or some retouching, some adjustments, whatever you want to call it. And I'll avoid these 2 or 3 models showing off, because I think Eugen doesn't want that, not 100% clear. In any case, I'll show you the stats, of course, and nearly everything I can show you. And if the build that we have of this preview version, right, this is beta build, so to speak, is stable enough, I'll also be streaming later today, so you can ask me questions or just see the stuff live in action. And in general, you can, from now on, essentially expect some gameplay content as well. Obviously, you can get yourself the DLC on the 30th of September, I think it's when it's coming out. And yeah, let's jump into it. We're gonna go in just in chronological order. I'll leave timestamps for the specific categories in the description if you're just interested in certain stuff. But yeah, Alouette 3. I mean, it's an Alouette. This is helicopter CV, nothing special. Commandant CV, again, nothing special, but it comes with some very interesting transports. Basically the whole Rattel line, which is an interesting transport line, as well as their basic transports. I'll go over the transports, might as well right now, right? Samuel 50 is your basic 5-pointer. Buffle and the Caspier Mark II, effectively interchangeable except for like top armor, as well as, autonomy. Your basic 10-point wheels transport with an MG. Caspier K-Car is essentially your slightly worse VAB T20. 1 armor, high rate of fire autocannon, but 15% accuracy. If you compare this to the VAB T20, we have similar to fire, etc., but slightly lower accuracy and a bit less ammunition. The Rattel 20, essentially a slightly better VAB T20, is virtually the same autocannon, but 2 front armor. However, even though it's the same price, you will get reduced availability with infantry that comes in them, excluding the infantry CV, of course. Rattel 20 Milan, same thing, but you also get an additional Milan F1 launcher. Rattel 60 is a transport mortar, only 42 rounds, so you're gonna run out very quickly, but you have 2 HE, essentially the same fire pattern, as the AML 60, even, same ranges, etc., etc. Then we have the Rattel 90, which for 15 points you get the GT2, which is just like the AML 90. So, decent range, HE, heat gun, lacks a lot in AP, doesn't have the best rate of fire. And of course, with no MG or anything else, it has nothing against helicopters. A basic Puma, and then an Oryx, which is essentially a bigger, beefier Puma, faster, and more HP. Obviously nothing special. Oliphant is your tank CV. Oliphant being essentially a Centurion. 105mm gun, right? Not the, what is it, the 17-pounder? Hold on. I think, does it show 20-pounder, 20-pounder? I don't know my pounds, I'm sorry. Don't look at the tank type yet. But yeah, you standard tank CV. Rattel BV. Standard APC CV, Rover is your cheap CV. Buffle, Caspier, Rattel, they're very, very similar. Rattel, of course, 2 front armor. These do not have this. The Buffle, even no arm armored at all. So, very, very similar thing. As you may have noticed, wheels, lots of wheels. This is, in the logistics tabs, the only thing that is tracked. And outside of the tank tab and the logistics tab, you will not see anything tracked unless I'm misremembering stuff. So this could be interesting. FOB, of course. Fun fact, by the way, as of now, the only FOB with a different unit card. Not sure if it's gonna get fixed or not, but I just find it funny. And then we have a 70-point supply helo, 10-point supply truck, 40-point supply truck. They're all standardized, of course, essentially the same stats, except for the helicopter speed, which tends to be a bit different, right? If you compare this to the Super Stallion, a bit slower, but same payload, same HP, etc., etc. But it's just a logistics hub, nothing too interesting, except I guess for the fact that the infantry CV gets access to literally all transports. I don't think there's any transport they don't get. Maybe I'm wrong. A lot of transports at least, you know. Whereas other nations, not all of them, but other nations only get basic ones. Some others get the IFVs and APCs. Yeah, but you get the Rattels for the Commandant as well. Now, infantry tab, one of, you know, the most important, might be the most important tab for this deck. It's a very infantry heavy deck, motorized heavy deck. We have the unit Unita, or Unita, whatever it's pronounced. Basic recoilless rifle. Does have the quote-unquote full 1400 meter range for 10 points, which up until this DLC wasn't the case. I'll, you know, go a bit ahead here and show this off already. The base tanker charge are also gonna get changed to 10 points. So now we have two 10-point infantry, 10-point recoilless rifles with the 1400 meter range. Before you only had the Biban Shung Po with a 1225. But so far in the games that I've played in, they're not particularly, you know, crucial. But you know, it can be nice. But of course, only wheel transports, no tracked transports, no 5-point transports. Bokop are your basic line infantry. RPG-7, which is unique for blue 4 10-point line infantry. You have some RPGs for Israel, but I believe that's it on blue 4. Usually you have only laws or something for 10 points. So that's pretty nice. You get the same transports as the CV, except for the 5-point cheap. But of course, this being very cheap, you can get them to get your Rattels very cheap, especially Rattel 20s and 20 Milans and Rattel 90s, or Rattel 60s if you want to spam those. They're gonna be, if you mainly want transport spam, Bokops are gonna be your option. Rattel 20 specifically being pretty good. Actually, let me go into the deck menu to show you off the availability. Now keep in mind, South Africa gets a 20% availability bonus. So, you know, anything, so multiply your base availability by 1.2, right? And everything that's above, you know, 0.5 gets an additional unit. So Bokop 24, their base availability is 20, right? 20% is 4 additional units. As long as, you know, the additional unit would be between 0.5 and, you know, 0.5 or higher, it rounds up, is what I'm trying to say here. So the Rattel 20 hurting the availability is not as big of a deal for South Africa, right? 17 and 12, not particularly high for line infantry, but in general, not that bad. If we now switch over to blue for unspec, you can see that you only get 14 and 10, right? This is the base availability because there's no availability bonus. So the Rattel 20 and the 20 Milan, even more so, as well as the Rattel 90, do hurt the availability quite a lot. And the 20% availability bonus for South Africa keeps them in line, so to speak. Or like, not in line, but even if you're playing unspec, you have a good amount still. Alright, back to the Armory. But yeah, Rattel 20 Milan, Rattel 60, Rattel 90. Same transports. Bokop 90, upgraded version with the FT5. Again, work in progress. You know, no icon yet for the weapon. 23 AP, 700 meter range, and 60% accuracy. Quite formidable. But with the exception of Apilas that are exclusive to a single elite unit, this is going to be your main AT weapon. Which means you have nothing above 23 AP on infantry. And you have like no high availability or relatively affordable like 20 RPM high AP launcher, right? So they are very strong for 15 points, but it's not like you get shock squads with Apilas or you get Eric squads or anything like that. So you know they have to make up for that with the FT5 launcher, even on line infantry, which rival Fusilier 90s to a certain extent. Sure, they lose 10 RPM, but they are more accurate, I think. I always think they have 50% accuracy, but it's only the Apilas. You get one more AP, which of course, not really a good trade-off for 10 RPM, but still, compared to many other 90s line infantry, very, very strong. Presumably, honestly, the second strongest, just purely on infantry when it comes to AT. Sure, there's 24 AP on models Strelki 90, but they have significantly less range and also less accuracy. But they're very formidable for 15 points. Basic Buffaloes, basic 15-man squads. RPG 7, not particularly good. Battle Rifle, but the HK21, which is a mini-me style clone, which means essentially the best MG you could have. There might be a niche for them for infantry grinding, but I think, as we'll see in a bit, there are better options. Buffalo's 85, which many, including myself, have been a bit scared of. 15-man squad. MG, basic MG, not the MG is a downgrade here, by the way. Basic assault rifle and Milan F1. Now, high HP squad, especially if they have MG and primary weapon with like long range ATGMs, a bitch to deal with in towns. Really, really difficult. Look at Norlandsjägare or Fallschirmjägare, which have even less range but still are very, very hard to deal with. Now you have shock squads with the Milan F1. Of course, Milan F1 isn't like, gonna one-shot super heavies from the front or anything like that, but still, especially against IFV, is quite annoying. However, when playtesting thus far over the past weeks, both when it comes to playing against South Africa as well as playing against Mixed Blue 4, they've been good, but by no means as scary or oppressive or impactful as feared. Sure, we've not been like hundreds of people playtesting this, but thus far they didn't feel like ridiculous to an extent. So they are strong, don't get me wrong, but not to a crazy amount. Not a Maglan level or anything like that. Another thing to keep in mind, neither of those squads get the Ratel line, right? They only get the basic transports and helicopters, so you don't get them in proper IFV, APCs, whatever you want to call them. So only one armored ground transports or helicopters. And of course, no rocket bot helicopters or autocannon helicopter transports even for South Africa. Wargame are going to be your reservists, 15 men, but again, only in 10-point transports or in the K car, which is kind of interesting. But given that the Wargame come at very low veterancy, that also means that the K car doesn't get a significant boost to its accuracy because, you don't get a high veterancy. But if you want some spam, here they are. Inflict, now they're unique. They're a fire support team with 1925 meter range, which is vastly superior, vastly higher than any of the other fire support, right? Again, 1400 meters, essentially the max range until now. That's a lot of extra range you get. But as you might see, no AP, but twice the HE. The other thing to keep in mind is the suppression is also a lot higher, because the suppression you see on regular rifles is the AP suppression. The high explosive suppression on all the Ridiculous rifle squads are 50, so less than a fourth of what the Inflict has. Coupled with the very, very high range, it also means that if they fire at max range, it's very, very hard to spot them unless you have Recon very close to them, or like in a reasonable range. So they're defensive powerhouses who can also not on their own necessarily deal with, but have some be significant support against IFVs and lightly armored stuff. And that longer range means that on many maps there are town blocks from which they can suddenly support assaults onto other forts or town blocks where beforehand you never really had the option to do something like that, because you just don't have that long range town-based HE fire support, if you will. So they are incredibly, incredibly useful to have, but also weak in CQC scenarios against other infantry. You don't want to have them fight at 200 or 300 meter range. You don't want to. They're like their name suggests, right? They're fire support, but even more so than fire support tends to be in Wargame. Yeah, very, very strong. And they used to be a lot stronger, but they got toned down, which is good. As in general, this DLC, not pretty decent. Mech-Inf are going to be your shock squads. One of your shock squads, I should say. I'm gonna say one thing first. You might see they're armored only. And you might also see, hey, all the transports are wheeled. Yes, some of the transports are in armored, which means that you get wheeled transports in a deck that typically has no wheeled stuff outside of 5-point trucks. Specifically, you get the Buffles and the Rattel series. And the Mechanisms are also exclusive to Armored. You can build a South African Armor deck. You get some other units as well in Armored, outside of Infantry and Tanks, of course. But yeah, it was either this or Mechanized. And I think or hope that everyone agrees that it would be better to have stuff like this roam around in blue 4 Armor than blue 4 Mech. I don't think anyone thinks that blue 4 Mech needs buffs. But so far, while certainly making the blue mix deck stronger, blue mixed armor specifically, nothing crazy, nothing like really ridiculous. Mechanisms themselves, basic ones are essentially just like your basic Legion, your basic Rima. You have your battle rifle, you have a basic default MG, so to speak, and then LRAC F1. Little stat copies of Rima, if you will. And they only get the Buffle. Oh no, they also get the whole transports except for the helicopters, right? Mechanism 90, upgraded version, they get an assault rifle, the FT5 again, and the SS77, which again, just the default MG. At least for now. I don't think anything like this is gonna get changed, but this is a preview version, things can change. Next up, you only dedicated AT team, Milan 1. Again, you do not get Milan 2, you do not get Milan 3. The only AT GMs you get are Milan 1 on the Buffaloes 85 and on the Milan squad themselves. Just like the other Milan squads, 2 HP, Milan F1, battle rifle, 15k mage, regular training, and once again they get the exact same transports. Next up we have Parabat, the first and presumably only blue version of Mordschützen, kind of. Again, they get the RPG, they get an assault rifle, and the FN Mag, which is a default MG. Very, very similar to Mordschützen, 15-point shock squads, RPG 7, 10 HP, assault rifle MG. But of course, a different MG. And this MG is worse than the RPK. So they are not quite on the same level as Mordschützen. The other issue, if you want to call it an issue, the other thing is, of course, they don't get 5-point transports, they don't get tracked IFVs, they only get, at minimum, 10-point transports, and they also do not have access to the Rattel series. They're airborne troops, and I presume airborne troops do not get the Rattels. So you can get them in like the lights transports or the Pumas or the helicopters once again. Parabat 90. Once again, FT5 assault rifle and the mini SS, which compared to the SS77 is a mini-me clone. I think it might be literally a mini-me, who knows? I don't know. I wouldn't know. But yeah, significantly better against infantry. Not necessarily per point for the price, right? They're 10 points more expensive, but one-on-one, significantly better. Sapper are gonna be your default flamer squads, access to all the transports again. Then we get to the SASF, which are kind of like the blue version of the FJB. Low-end dual-purpose squads, so to speak. They get an upgrade in terms of AT, but a downgrade in terms of AA. Now, everyone laughs at Strellas and yes, they're garbage, but the FJB, especially the FJB Strela, isn't really that bad. While sure, it has only 3 HE, FJB are our lead, come at a higher veterancy, so that basic accuracy of 50%, which is honestly not too bad, gets boosted a good amount, and with a reload time of 4 seconds compared to 6 seconds on Iglas, especially against helicopters, far from useless. Now the SASF get the worse Strela 2M with less range and less accuracy, but again, like I said, better AT weapons, so like an interesting trade-off. And like the airborne troops, basic ground transports, and the Puma and Oryx, no Rattels. SASF 90, like I said earlier, they get the Apelas, the only Apelas squad you have, and the A-Stinger. Similar to, Erikois, except that they're in the infantry tab, and of course, instead of the Igla, you get the Stinger, assault rifle instead of SMG. Yeah. Solid, very, very good squads, in fact. And, yeah, nothing else. Then you have the Stinger, which is your basic Stinger squad. No Rattels. I assume that the UNITA line, I don't know, maybe there's some airborne troops or something like that. Just like the B10 squads, do not get access to the Rattels. The Strela 2 and Strela 3 teams do, but they're Strela 2 and Strela 3s respectively, so think of that what you will. And again, like I said, full access to all the transports. And my goodness, I've really already stretched this to 20 minutes. I'm not even doing this on purpose. Anyway, support tab. Some more things that people were scared of. First of all, Cactus, your basic Rotal, not available in Armored. Cactus SAHV, your upgraded Rotal, still non-radar, is fine forget. I mean, I can pin this, right? But I think I can showcase the differences easier if I just flip back and forth. But as you can see, improved accuracy and 175 more meters additional range versus helicopters. Still not in Armored. Roycard ZA HVM is available in Armored. Is a radar. Is, I presume, still kind of like a based on Crotal or whatever these missiles are. Same range versus helicopters. Not fire and forget, but massively increased range versus planes, 4,200. Same accuracy, and as all Roycards, as you will later see, incredible off-road speed of 120 km/h. 3 front armor, as all the Roycards, which is pretty good for a wheeled vehicle. But yeah, this is a very, very strong dual-purpose AA piece, very reminiscent of the Hawk 3, which is also a dual purpose, but of course the Roycard being a lot more maneuverable, having an additional missile, which mainly matters versus helicopters with 10 HP. Because every other helicopter the Hawk will one-shot, of course. More accuracy, less plane range, but the same very rare 3,500 meter range versus Helos. Very good AA piece, for sure. Elan 60 is your, 2HE motor. Might be the exact same vehicle as this thing here. Probably is, if you look at it. Yeah. Rattle 81 is your 3HE motor, and the Rattle 120 is your 5HE motor, with the same firing pattern as the VPM 120, which means slightly higher to fire, as well as slightly reduced aim time, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, 60 points and not a lot of rounds. Rover 107. It's some meme little napalm launcher. I've not used it myself, I've played against it. But yeah, like all napalm launchers, not inherently bad, but typically just not very easy to fit in because they have a relatively niche role, and typically you're better off just using normal MLRS. Speaking of Valkyrie, I believe 30 seconds aim time, relatively standard MLRS. It's not too bad, actually. Let me actually open the Armory tool in the meantime. Not too bad. The splash radii are not too bad. The high base range means that a little closer range, or not too high base range means that you can make use of that range scaling relatively quickly. No, what am I talking about? No, yes. What I mean is, it is relatively accurate at closer ranges, 24 missiles. It is pretty light on supply, not crazy, but at the moment it is pretty light. Pretty light unless they changed it. Didn't take a look at all the detailed sets just yet. The Butler is exactly the same thing as the PHL 181 or the Czech or Polish. Yep, or the Czech one. Carries only half the rockets, which is why it's cheaper. But other than that, it's basically the same thing. Sexton is some weird 4HE howitzer. This is not a mortar. I think this might be the only 4HE howitzer we have. Currently, I think the lowest is like 5HE, which is, for example, on the Priest, But I don't think we've seen 4HE yet. The Rhino, which is the most accurate tube artillery piece in the game. More accurate than AS-90, more accurate than M110A1, more accurate than Malka. So yeah, it is quite accurate. Doesn't have the best rate of fire, but I'm not sure if that gets changed. Again, if later today or for me tomorrow, I'll be streaming, I can answer these questions or go into a lot more detail then. The Easterwag, I'm not going to show the model directly because Siege doesn't want to, is essentially same thing as this one, exact same stats, so not particularly good, I'll be real. Bossvarg is essentially your Ural truck. For 15 points, it's okay. If you want some cheap like base defense or flank defense spec, it's gonna do its job. It's honestly not like garbage. And we have another Roy Cut variant, which is the spec. Rate of fire is the same thing as a Gepard, gun tank, marksman. Decent base accuracy, not a particularly good stabilizer, but it has a stabilizer. And you know, being one of the few wheel specs, like proper specs, the only other one really being just Throp 2. You don't typically see stabilizers in those, right? So, yeah. And of course, you know, same range, etc. as Gepards as well. Tank tab, the weakest tab, we have the Wargame, which is just a heavy tank, right? 23 AP, good accuracy, decent stabilizer, only 8 RPM, not all auto-loaded, by the way. 20 front armor, not the best side armor. 7 side armor is pretty weak for 155 points. On this price range, you only really see it on the Leclerc, but other than that, you have to go quite a bit cheaper to get this low on side armor. Not the best rear or top armor. Good speed, but the autonomy is lacking. You know, if you ever played with the Kuma Roshiki, you know that, or even just I think the M1A1, yeah, the high-end Abramses. After an engagement or two, you're gonna start to run into trouble with the fuel already. The Oliphant line, and of course, 4 HE, because like UK, hash rounds, so they get extra HE on their 150mm rounds. Oliphant Mark 1. It's a Centurion. Yeah, I guess it's a Centurion. It carries an MG4 or like a 7.62mm MG, so not like, let's say, this Centurion, which carries a Browning, same armor, a bit better speed, worse autonomy, and of course having a 105mm gun, significantly better gun stats, more range, more AP, more suppression. Yeah, Oliphant Mark 1A already gets a full gun range, which is pretty rare. You see it on the AMX and RCSB, but other than that, not on too many vehicles in this price range, I believe. Like I said, the AMX 10 here, but no Leopard 104, nope. Canada or something, nope. Right? So pretty early full gun range, which isn't too bad, but it still suffers the same problems, right? Not the best armor, but I guess for the price it's okay, but no optics, low speed, low autonomy. Relatively niche tank. If you had like medium optics or something, could be good for flanks, but other than that, you're probably not going to make too much use out of this. Oliphant Mark 1B. It's a decent motorized tank. No MGs anymore. But, you know, 10 RPM, 16 AP, decent front armor for the price. All around solid tank. The Optimum is like, just like the Maxas, kind of like so much stuff put on the tank, it doesn't really look like a Centurion anymore. 15 front armor, 17 AP, again 10 RPM, full range, medium optics. Very, very strong tank, medium tank, but 360 kilometers autonomy is bad. It is quite bad. You're gonna run into troubles when it comes to fuel with this tank. And that's really somewhat holding it back, or somewhat keeping it balanced rather at 80 points. You know, the armor and gun sets are very, very good, but the autonomy is really holding it back. Or like keeping it from like not being too ridiculous. And of course, it is a prototype just like the Wargame. Guess I should mention that for some of the units, right? The SSF90 is prototyped, Roy Cuts are prototyped, the AA pieces, SAHV is prototyped. Rhino is not prototyped, by the way. I guess I should show off. Yep, the Rhino is an armored, but like none of the strong only the prototype AA pieces really are armored, except for the Bossvarg and the Easterwag. But yeah, now we come to the Roy Cuts. Now the basic one, the Roy Cut 76. Again, that amazing speed, 3 front armor, which is good. Really good accuracy and stabilizer even. Medium optics. 7 RPM, 2100 meter range, 12 AP and 2 HE. Not particularly good to deal with like proper tanks, anything like that. but like you can still very much harass around flanks. In the opener, you can deal with IFVs and APCs. If you sneak around, you can deal with AAPCs, etc. While you won't spot stuff in cover with those medium optics, on maps like Mudfight or something where there's not too much cover anyway, or if there's like a natural line of sight blockade, like, you know, a town block or a big forest, but the AA piece is, let's say, behind this, you will be easily able to spot that. And so it's still very, very powerful for harassing and, you know, driving around. And it is not a prototype, as well as available in Armored. Rocket 105 is a prototype, exact same stats except for the gun, which has higher RPM and 17 AP, full range, and 3 HE. That hits like a truck. It's like the Vickers, but you have significantly increased off-road speed and 3 front armor. The 3 versus 2 front armor versus from the Vickers, of course, means you are a lot more durable versus autocannons, low AP heat guns, which honestly are pretty rare, or rocket bots, or anything that deals HE damage, right? So in that scenario, that really, really helps. But yeah, this is gonna be a big, big key unit for South Africa. Recon tab, another Alouette. Who cares, honestly? If LR90 and LR90 NTAC, I'm not gonna show them off, but you know, they have the same GT2 gun as the AIM-L90, and the NTAC has an additional useless missile. Rocket 76 is the exact same unit as the tank tab Rocket Mark 1, except it has very good optics and medium stealth, 410 points more. And compared to the tank tab version, exclusive to Moto, which is good. But yeah, unlike the tank tab version, you can sneak around with this and spot stuff in cover, snipe, you know, AA pieces in cover, artillery, whatever you have. Very, very good unit. Another very important unit. Para Pathfinders are like, no, not like, but they're literally like shock versions of either Navy SEALs or Formosa, whichever you want to call them. They have an HK-21, which is mini-me, but it's mostly irrelevant because they have a grenade launcher, so they're gonna be really, really good for town grinding, or, you know, if there are some vehicles around, dealing with infantry in forests. And much, much better than Formosa or Navy SEALs, because they have essentially the same stats on the grenade launcher, but they're 6 per card versus 4 per card, and 5 points cheaper. And they have a very, very similar HE output. It's really because it's mainly about a grenade launcher, not so much about the other weapons. And of course, while they're firing the grenade launcher, they can't really make use of their MG. Rover Jeep, and of course, sorry to miss that, none of the Recon squads get access to the Rattels. Recon Jeep SASF Sniper, they're gonna be like your Senke, like your Recce, anti-material kinetic sniper team, 2 men, exceptional stealth, very good optics, very fast, you know, the usual. Trackers, very similar to Bedouins. They don't have an AT weapon, but an MG instead, which is honestly not particularly good, but there you have it. Your very cheap Recon squads, again, basic transports. And last, but by no means least, the XH1 Alpha. 30 points, good optics, has a very good autocannon, 749 RPM, you know, same thing as on the Rattels, 25% accuracy though. And most importantly, unlike, let's say, the cannon, this thing has a turret, which means it's gonna be much, much better at like killing stuff on the fly, or, you know, much faster at aiming stuff that is already stationary, because the whole helicopter doesn't have to turn. But it is also much, much slower at only 220 kmh. Still though, a very, very versatile and strong unit. Vehicles, let's get the transports out for now. Ferret NTAC is just, yeah, same thing as the ANZAC thing, I think, right? Except you only get 4 missiles instead of 6. Not sure if intentional or not, but I find it funny. Ferret Mark II Milan, again, only Milan 1. And we have a Rattel with Swift missiles that have 20 AP, 2625 meter range, 70% accuracy, same speed as the tow missiles, right? So essentially, this is an ITOW, but you get extra accuracy, if you will. And you can fire 3 in a row before having to reload for 15 seconds. Rover 106 is your rover. It's the less range than the Wombat, right? Yep. Just the Ridiculous Rifle cheap. You can also get the same Ridiculous Rifle on the Ferret, but more AP and a bit more accuracy, but still the 750-meter range. So on the Ferret, of course, you know, you have 1 armor and 10 HP. And then with the Rattle 90 FS3, which is the exact same thing as a transport, except as a dedicated vehicle type thing for 5 points more, but of course you don't have to buy infantry with it. You know, same stats. So I'm just gonna show you the Rattle 9 specifically here. Rattle 20, 2 armor, 15 points, VAB T20 autocannon, right? High RPM, low accuracy, low range, 2 AP, but again, that high rate of fire, especially close range, is really, really good for murdering infantry. Rattle 20 Milan gets an additional Milan 1 for 5 points. Rattle 6 is a mortar, you know, same mortar as you get, whoopsie, in the support tab, except, you know, less ammo and it carries infantry. And then the Rattle 90 with the 8 AP, decent range and decent HE, heat gun, acceptable accuracy, but not the best RPM. And of course, no stabilizer, right? So similarly to the AMX 10, you can't just fast move and shoot at stuff while driving. Helicopters, we have the Alouette K-Car, which honestly is not as useless or garbage as you might think. Similarly to the Puma Pirate, I think it might even have the same gun. It has the gun, sorry, that's the wrong one. It has the gun on the side. See, stats are exactly the same. The gun on the side of the helicopter. But this is a very small helicopter and it's very, very nimble. So even while flying, it will very quickly turn around. And while this is on the side, there's an angle that can shoot it, right? So it's a pseudo turret, if you will. So it actually doesn't take too long for it to align and shoot at other targets. But of course, it's by no means like, you know, ridiculous levels. Transport Puma and Oryx, of course. And we have the XCPs, which are essentially Oryxes. Oh no, Pumas, actually, excuse me. They have a very, very strong gun, 40% accuracy, 30% stabilizer, and again, that's 749 RPM. You know, Marder 1, VAB T20, VVP M80A, Rattle 20, they all have this very high RPM. 2 AP, same range. AP and range are basically standardized for all the helicopter-based autocannons, right? If you look at the Apache, same AP, same range. If you look at the Mi-28, same, actually it's 3 AP, but still the same range. So unlike the ground-based 20mm autocannons, you don't suffer from less range, and typically not as much from lower AP, though in some situations you still do. But especially the range is still the same. And with having lower base accuracy, but making up for high RPM, you gain a bit more from the range scaling as well. Medium optics, a good amount of rocket pods, and 2 AA missiles. So this is, in practice, less of a AA helicopter and a lot more like a support helicopter, similarly to the Escort, right? You're pretty affordable, have a decent autocannon, a lot of rocket pods, fast, medium, or not particularly fast, but you know, fast enough. Medium optics. And those two cookeries honestly are more of a bonus that, you know, maybe you're gonna, you know, shoot at the plane or, you know, deal some damage to a helicopter, maybe shoot down something unarmed, who knows. But you're not gonna use this to really, you know, cover your helo drops in the opener. I mean, you can, but they're not nearly as like effective as like so-called stabs, whatever you have. And we have the 90 version, which is essentially an AT helicopter, carries 4 Ingves, that very similar to Hellfires, stat-wise. Right, same range, same AP, same accuracy, same stabilizer. But just like the ground-based Swifts, they are significantly slower than Hellfires. They are more like, again, more like TOWs, more like hot missiles. Not nearly comparable to something like other cars or whatever you have on the Mi-28. So they're a lot slower than that. Still have the range of 26 AP, but easier to evade, I guess. And half the rocket pods. Then we have the Roigwag, the high-end AT helo, still the Ingves, so not particularly fast missiles, still the autocannon, more HP, more speed, and carries 4 Mistrals. So this is very, very similar like your, I guess like the Recon, like the German Tiger, except you're in a helicopter type. You don't have stealth either, but you know, you're I guess you're Aquila, you know, 4 AA missiles, strong AT, autocannon. But typically, honestly, I find thus far you're better off just running both of the beta versions, both of the beta helicopters. Because you still get the same missiles, you still get the same amount of missiles on the XCP. And in practice, I think if you're buying such a helicopter, rocket pods are generally more useful, you're more affordable, you know, and if you're in range of AA, that 8 HP typically not gonna really make you survive. Last but not least, the planes. Let me check which one was the plane that Mirage F1. Which one's the Mirage F1? This one. Okay, I'm not gonna show this one yet, but it's a very interesting plane. Buccaneer is your, in a sense, strongest AT plane. 430 AP missiles. But of course, they're semi-active. They only have 35% base accuracy. And the plane has only 600 kmh top speed, 0% ECM, and a time over target of only 60 seconds. This is more of a, I wouldn't say win more type of plane, but a plane that you bring out if you notice your opponent is out of AA or the AA is out of ammo, or maybe you can even try to snipe the AA with this thing because it's out in the open. And you can be relatively certain that it's not gonna stun or kill you before. But of course you don't want to buy this if you know the enemy has books or patriots or something around and you're just hoping to survive because you don't have any ECM to gamble with, right? Unless you're like really desperate, and you can always try. But this is really a plane that, you know, mobs up once you dealt with the supporting units, being the AA, you know, etc. It has immense killing potential, and coming on 2 on veteran, like 2 upwitted, and with range scaling, you know, being semi-active missiles, it is actually not that undeadly. Meaning, it is actually quite deadly. And we know with 4 missiles, it's not a big of a deal if 1 or 2 miss. One will eventually connect. But of course, unlike something like a Hornet 27M, Peace Pheasant, not something that you can always rely on, you know. Especially on big maps, it takes a while until it's at a target, it gets spotted early, and the enemy has a long time to react. So it is not as universal as most other TGM planes, but does have immense killing potential. And even though the airframe, right, the plane, has absolutely garbage stats, it is still a plane worth running in South Africa. Or it would even be in other decks, right? It's not. You might think it looks horrible, but it's not actually that bad. Believe me. Then you have the Carver, the high-end ASF, 50% ACM, exceptional air detection, fast, good turn radius, and 2 high-end missiles, right? We have the Darter, short range 6 HE missile, and the other Darter. With the U Darter and the V4R Darter, sorry. And the V4R Darter being essentially the same thing as the Derby, right? Compared to the AIM-120 on, let's say, the KWS, you lose 700 meter range, but you gain 10% accuracy, right? And of course, you know, very high-end SRAMs as well. You know, basically like the Barak 2. Except you get 1 more additional HE, but a bit less range versus planes on the SRAMs, which honestly I literally only just now noticed. But still 50% ECM, fast, etc. Then you have the Cheetah D, which is your seed plane. Now this is a bit of a different seed plane. I'll briefly show this at the end of this video. But for one, of course, HE only. I mean, that's all there is that you can see on a sidecar, right? That's the main thing. It's HE only, and of course it has less range. Before this, the lowest range seed missile you could have was, for example, the Shrike with 4,200 meter range. Now you have 3,500. And of course, HE only, it fires in a double time, right? So 2 in quick succession. So it's essentially a one-shot. It's a one-shot Marty. So low armor or no armor AA pieces will get killed relatively easily. But as soon as you go into like a 3 or 4 armor range, you're mainly gonna get stunned unless you're damaged beforehand. Especially something like a Challenger Marksman is not gonna take significant damage from this. But it's still like a Cheetah D, right? It has good ECM, it's fast, it has twin Deva, which is essentially Vulcan, very good gun, and 2 darters, so it's also a good helo sniper. And it has some additional usage that I'll show you at the end of this video. Saber and Impala are your rocket pod planes, low and cheap, no ECM, low speed, whichever you prefer. Mirage 3 ZZ, very, very similar, if not the same as the Anseg one. No, that's the wrong one, this one. Very, very low and only 1 MRAM, so Not really one that you want to rely on. Honestly, not really worth putting into your deck. Then we have the Mirage F1ZZ that I'm not supposed to show yet, I think. Or like avoid showing. I'm not gonna like get killed or anything if I do. Which is essentially, you know, your pure heal hunters type of deal. Decent ECM for the price, and the missiles aren't the worst. And of course, you still have the Twin Defa, which is a very good gun. Cheetah C is a slightly lower end version of the Carver, but still quite high end, right? You still get a V3C darters, which have less accuracy, but still 5 HE. And also the V4R darters. So a bit worse than the Carver, but high veterancy, still 40% ECM. And the base stats on the missiles are still fine. These are your main ASFs, but both of them have low ordnance, right? Like Yak 141s, like the Barak 2s, they're gonna have trouble killing more than one plane in the run. But just versus one plane, they're very, very efficient. Then we have the Mirage 3 EZ, which is your other tank plane, but honestly not as good as the Buccaneer in most scenarios. Yes, it's faster, still no ECM, only one missile, and it's the same missile, right? So it's one and done, and with only 35% base accuracy, you're gonna have to micro to make better, like consistent use out of this, because what you do is you turn off the missile, and you know, force the plane to gun run, and then turn on the missile fairly late, so it gets at high range scaling accuracy. But yeah, no ECM. It's not particularly amazing. Mirage F1AZ, 6 cluster planes. It has 3 base availability per card, so it's honestly not too bad. Sure, for like 20 points more, you can get twice the payload on a Danish plane, but it's cheaper, higher available, and you know, if you were to go 3 of them, you can have a more focused, you know, cluster bombing run, whatever you want to call it. But it's a decent cluster plane. It has a bit low ECM, with literally only 10% the lowest you can have while having ECM. But it's not too horrible. Very comparable to the MiG-23BN, that is now also 3 per card. But this one has 20% ECM, but no missiles. Cheetah E. By the way, the bombs, this is still a work in progress. They're supposed to be like under the belly, you know, we're not. So don't focus on this. Useless bomber. It's a bad bomber, I'm sorry. Like 8-10 HE bombs for 120 points. It's just like, sure, you're quite survivable for a bomber. You're fast, you have good turn rate, it's 30% ECM, but like 10 HE bombs are so bad, and like 120 HE bomb is so much more effective than like 8-10 HE bombs in just so many scenarios. It's laughable, honestly. Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's not a very good bomber. And we have the Cheetah D2, which is your consistent AT plane. You know, it's very, very similar to the Q5D. 2 15 HE laser guided bombs. It's faster, has the same ECM, also has some short range missiles, better ones as well. But it's also 5 points more expensive. But very, very similar. Comes at high veterancy as well. And good at like dealing some, not necessarily guaranteed, but very high percentage damage on tanks, and as well stunning them very consistently. Very, very good plane to have. Then we have these 2 planes that are literally never used. A useless napalm plane, I'm sorry, but like slow, no ECM. If at least it was fast, you know, there was some usage, but as it is now, it's just not particularly good. And a Canberra. Good payload, don't get me wrong, but again, so slow. And unlike the Buccaneer, right, when the Buccaneer is in range, the missile is out and like hits within a second. The Canberra has to fly a lot deeper, drop the bombs, and the bombs fly for like another second. So much easier to evade than something like a Buccaneer. And the Buccaneer can, of course, snipe AA that wants to kill the Buccaneer. But the Canberra, you know, you could bomb AA, but even Hawks are gonna have enough time to just evade that, and they're just gonna stun you anyway. So yeah. And for 110 points, right, it's just, yeah. Bombers are just a different type of story than anti-tank planes. And of course, I only just, you know, I literally haven't taken a look at this naval tab of South Africa, like what's available at all. I never have. Only now I didn't. I don't know. I never bothered to take a look before. It looks like they have literally everything available, except some transports. The the helicopter transports, you know, but I guess it makes sense that they don't come with. Anyway, who cares? It's kind of funny though. Yeah. It was this. Let me briefly show you what I mean with the Cheetah D. Alright, so we're gonna quickly hop into a skirmish. We're gonna take our Cheetah D. Let's play some tank rounds, right? So I can show this better. And some infantry. Yeah, it's actually just in case. So, what you can do with this thing, right? This is HE seed. Unlike normal seed, you can fire position, right? I'm gonna turn these off just to make sure to show this. You can fire position with these barbs. Which is incredible additional utility. However, as good as this is, and it is good, trust me, it's very, very useful to have. As the missiles rearm relatively quickly compared to other seed mains, it luckily does not hit top armor. So it doesn't hit the top armor of this Oliphant. You know, it barely took any damage. But especially if you hit, which is a bit lucky here, but they're also up with it. They're good for like sniping stationary infantry or something like that. But of course, if you only even miss by like a bit, let's fire like in here. Right, this one missed, and this one hit right next to them. Doesn't really deal significant damage. The Oryx got hit, but the Commandant is perfectly safe, right? So I have to basically pinpoint, but still, even then they're okay for stunning, right? They have very, very high suppression radius, same as like 10 HE bombers, I believe, but being direct gameplay speaking missiles, they of course arrive much faster and are harder to evade. So it's, you know, fire in here, right? Stun, panicked. They're even down to 2 HP. You can see the dead man right here. That attack got hit from behind. This one got also hit from behind, but only took 4 damage, right? So very, very useful additional utility. But yeah, that's the South African DLC. The quick armory tour, and with quick, it's freaking 50 minutes. I did not intend this to go so long. I thought it was gonna be a 20-minute deal that's done. But yeah, like I said, assuming the game doesn't have any like bugs or crashes while playing, I'm gonna be streaming later today. You can ask me stuff, you can see it in action, etc. So yeah, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you think. And yeah, oh yeah, I should say, I genuinely think in 1 vs. 1s it is a formidable deck. But it's also a deck that the deck from all the like quote unquote top decks or good decks that aren't like meme, you know, 1980 national. It depends the most on like the matchup and a map it plays on. If you play large maps, or if you're playing team games and you don't overcrowd the map, let's say you play a 4v4 and 2v2 petty or something. But if you play on large maps and proper maps, South Africa is gonna thrive. If you play on crowded or small maps, let's say you play mud fight, you're gonna struggle. And the other thing is, if you don't know, most which is ranked, you're playing against South Africa is a bit stronger as well, because it has a very, very shock type of opener. It lifts a lot of its opener. If you lose the opener with South Africa, it's very, very hard to come back. So yeah, it's a very, let's say, volatile deck. I feel like if you're playing with or against South Africa, you won't have as many close games as you would with other decks. It's, I would say, more likely that you're gonna have clear wins or clear defeats, which of course it's not impossible to have close games, but I would say it's rarer. But I think it's in a good place. I don't think it is a strong deck. It is obviously a lot more unique than Netherlands, and I would also say stronger than Netherlands, but Netherlands of course gets a coalition. But it's not as on the same level as Israel on release or Baltic or Yugoslavia on release. I think it's in a good state. It probably needs some more fine-tuning here and there, but not a lot, I think. Could be wrong, but that's my impression thus far. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Later.